You are listening to the Billy Dees Podcast.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, we are primarily a commentary and an interview podcast, and we have an interview for you today on the studio line. With me, I have Eric Robinson. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate being here.
Awesome. So glad you are here. Now, he has recently retired from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, otherwise known as the FBI. After 24 years as a special agent, Eric worked a range of crimes, including white collar, counter-terrorism, crimes against children, gangs, drugs, and public corruption. He served as a SWAT operator, a firearms instructor, and a tactics instructor. Eric will soon release his first book, a collection of the humorous, surprising, and intriguing moments from his career. The memoir combines his years in law enforcement with his career prior to the Bureau. Eric joined the FBI after 12 years in Christian ministry, to include pastoring a Baptist church in Western New York. That's kind of an interesting combination of things. Let's start with that. Now, are you in New York now?
I'm not. I am in Michigan, just over the border from Toledo, Ohio.
Okay. Well, Ohio here. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on there with Michigan. But Ohio State's doing pretty good. So I'll claim that one.
All right.
Fair enough. The ministry. Let's start there. When you were younger, you obviously had that on your target first, in your sights first, because that's where you went. What drew you to the ministry?
Well, I grew up in a Christian household, and going through college, I made my faith and my spiritual journey more personal than it had been before. My family had always gone to church on Sundays, but it became more meaningful as I went through college. Mm-hmm. Came to a place where I thought it didn't feel necessarily as a calling, but as something that seemed to best fit me. So my wife and I eventually married, and we had planned on going overseas as missionaries to Muslim countries. And through a few issues, some family issues, we decided to put that off and just go into ministry stateside. So did the usual progression of youth pastor, assistant pastor, until I planted my own church in, I can't remember the year now, let's say 1997.
Okay.
And was senior pastor there for a number of years until finally I had health issues that necessitated a career change.
Okay. That's interesting, because you're jumping from something that I would say, I don't know that there's a lot of physical demands of being a pastor.
No.
But you jump to something that is what I would say is a lot of physical demands, which would be FBI, SWAT, and all that.
Yeah.
So what caused that transition?
So what was difficult for me, and what better men have been able to do better than I could, was I was unable to separate the issues that I was ministering to with people in the church from personalizing it. So the church that we planted was one meant to reach out to folks who wouldn't normally go to church. So we weren't just looking to move congregants from one place to another and take their offerings. We wanted to find folks who felt like they didn't fit in. And we were doing very well, and people were enjoying it. They were finding purpose. But the problem with bringing in people to a church who don't fit in otherwise is they had a lot of life issues, and they brought those with them. And as I spoke with people, and if a man says, I think my wife is cheating on me or my kid is addicted to heroin, I was unable to separate that from just perseverating on it. And so without exaggeration, I had stress-related headaches every day for 2 years straight.
Okay.
And I told my wife, I've got to do something else. I just can't do this. So I applied for 2 jobs, one I was overqualified for and one I was underqualified for. And I went into the FBI.
Okay. So which one were you over? The FBI, which one, what category did that fall in?
Well, I felt like I was underqualified. I mean, who doesn't think, oh, the FBI would be pretty cool? But I didn't know why they would select me. I applied. 9/11 happened. I had the background of working with Muslims, and I'm going to guess that probably had some role in them saying, oh, this guy can work with Muslims. Let's take him. Yeah. And then they put me on a drug squad.
My understanding is that the lone basic requirement, I could be wrong, was you have to have some sort of a college degree to apply. Is that correct?
Yep, that's one.
Okay. And obviously, I would imagine you have to pass a background check.
Polygraph, physical fitness test, and then you have to have a pretty clean record as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. All right. So that's quite the leap. What was some of your first duties? I mean, obviously they don't start you out with counter-terrorism on your first day. So,
well, they can.
Oh yeah.
I was placed on a counterterrorism squad right out to the bat, but then got moved immediately after that and worked drugs in the city of Chicago. We had 2 drug squads in the city of Chicago. And then after 5 years, they dissolved our drug squad, presumably because we had defeated the narcotics problem and it was all maintenance from there.
Interesting. When you have a background in talking to people a lot, with being the pastor, and pastors are often pseudo counselors, social workers, all that other good stuff. So going into the FBI, the interrogation techniques, things of that nature, did those skills combine at all?
Absolutely. And we are taught how to interrogate and interview in the FBI, but nobody remembers how to do it. It really comes from whether you have that ability to communicate with people, what your developed tact and standards are, and then just practice. So I remember doing post-arrest interviews, interrogations of drug dealers and not going so well, or sitting in as a senior agent, carried them out and trying to pick up from them what's effective. But what I had found was many of the qualities and skills that you reference here in counseling a person were useful in drawing people out, whether that's a witness, a victim, working with informants, or trying to get someone who's just been arrested to tell me things they really shouldn't tell me, and they know they shouldn't, but they're now doing it anyway.
Okay, interesting. I've always had, for the most part, a lot of respect for law enforcement across the board, whether it's the FBI or, your local people. And quite frankly, I think a lot of times the local people don't get their due. You can respond to this. There's 2 reforms I think we need in our judicial system and law enforcement in general. But I think that the time for professional juries might be to be considered. And I think one of the biggest flaws, other than the goofball juries, I think one of the other flaws is I think prosecutors have way too much discretion in terms of which cases they will take and which ones they won't. But
yes, to the second. The first, that's very interesting. I've never been proposed the idea of a professional jury. That's interesting. I would think folks who can be trained on that might do well, although that would be an awful job to have.
Yeah,
that'd be a tough one. But there is a lot of power in the hands of prosecutors. It's interesting because there's from my experience, a fairly significant difference between state and local prosecutors and federal prosecutors. Mm-hmm. Federal prosecutors just don't have the time to take on many cases. I bring them 6 guys from a financial crimes case to arrest. They'll say, oh, we're only going to do these 3 or 4 because they don't want to go to trial and they just want the slam dunk. So that happens a lot. And now I'm left with seeing, oh, okay, well, here's 3 people that I know are criminals, and I guess we'll just assume the system will get them later.
Yeah. In your work, some of the current events you have in your in our pre-production notes here, the current events impacting your perspective as a former agent. Here's one thing that I would notice, especially over the last 10 years. Here again, even through the Hoover years, the FBI, for the most part, was a nonpartisan organization, for the most part. Hoover had dirt on everybody. I don't care who it was, He had it on JFK. He had it on Malcolm X. He had it on Martin Luther King. He had it on Nixon. He had dirt on everybody, okay? And somewhere along the line, I think it started with Comey. Now, whether he's guilty of it or not, I don't know. But that's where I started to notice that the FBI was becoming viewed as a political arm as much as it was an investigative one. Is that correct from your perspective as someone who worked in the agency?
There's 2 FBIs. There is everything that makes the headlines. That's DC. And then there's the great majority of agents, support staff who work in the field. And the only thing that they are looking to do is to work the case that's in front of them, find guys who've committed crimes and bring them to justice. And the worst thing, if you polled FBI agents, they would let you know the worst thing that would happen to them is someone in DC having an interest in sticking their nose in their case for whatever reason. Yeah. So I had very, very little interaction with DC. Sometimes there would be notes that come down from a unit chief or someone else poking around, but they're just a different animal. Yeah. So that may have come about. I know even with Mueller, when I was in, he made the regular trips briefing Congress. So it's been for quite a while, and it's gotten further and further politicized. And so people speak about the FBI, but they're talking about people in DC. Yeah. Regular agents don't care at all about what goes on.
I'm kind of a firm believer when it comes to, what you guys do as part of the FBI. I know you're retired, but what you once did with the FBI is very similar to the armed forces. They always say that politics does not belong on the battlefield, but it always creeps in there. And I think the same goes for investigative work. I think if you're being aggressive towards a certain suspect because of some sort of a political affiliation, that's just as wrong as looking the other way. It just doesn't belong there. When you watch shows like, NCIS or whatever that is, well, that's Navy, but all the FBI shows, the one with Mark Harmon, was that FBI? I don't know.
No, that was NCIS too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, nonetheless, all the FBI shows, television in general. I know that it has contaminated juries, crime shows in general, because people have unrealistic expectations of what's going to work for evidence and so on and what isn't. But what are some of the things that you notice on television programs that is clearly just not true? It's something that for dramatic effect. What would you say?
So my youngest would watch Criminal Minds on reruns, and she would tell me, you get 5 complaints, and then I don't want to hear anything else. And I would eat up those 5 complaints in the first 2 minutes. And I say, well, we don't do that. That guy's got a gun different than that guy. And agents would often have maybe 2 times a year, or, depending on the size of the office, complaint duty. And complaint duty is when calls would come in from the public saying, I think this is a federal crime. And many times there would be people who are disturbed. But from that experience of having people call in or watching the FBI shows, we have computers, and those computers have what we have put in them. There's not a supercomputer where we can just tap in and find things. And it's gotten broader and broader and more sophisticated, and there's more abilities. But one of the most significant things is the difference. Folks will say, let's do a wiretap on this guy. The actual, I've been on a number of wiretaps. The time that it takes to go through just the internal process where I make the application still within the FBI, it doesn't even go outside to a judge yet, is weeks. And it's one of the most intrusive things we can do. So there's a lot of checks that go against it. And then the manpower it takes to sit on a wiretap is very intensive. Yeah. So we need the whole squad. So there's no capriciousness to tapping people's phones because it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. When you talk about the duties, I know that a lot of times because of these shows, the the FBI's role is always every day's a drama. But I would imagine that a lot of it, for lack of a better term, is just a lot of pain in the ass work, right? Going through stuff, research. What's a typical day like when you're working in the FBI?
If you made a film based on the typical day in the FBI, it would be rated R for profanity because people are yelling about how their computer doesn't work correctly. Yeah. But so it depends on what type of violation you're working. When I worked drug offenses in Chicago, my next day was always set up by the day before. So based on what went on, we were on phone taps constantly. So either I had the wire shift and I was coming in at 6 p.m. or I was coming in at 9 a.m., whatever it was, or I didn't have a shift. So now I'm going to be on surveillance to sit on this guy, or we've got a buy coming. When I worked crimes against children, I used to get angry at my wife because she would say, "Oh, what's on schedule for today?" And I would tell her, "I don't know. I plan on doing this, but then we're going to have a 14-year-old runaway that we have to go find because she's prostituting herself over at this motel." So when it came to financial crimes, I very much enjoyed that because that was like a crossword puzzle. Yeah. It's finding money, how it moves, who's behind it. So a lot of that was computer work and then followed up with investigation, interviews, and then followed up with subpoenas and then working with a forensic accountant, coming back again with further interviews. So depending on what violation you're working, it could be any number of things. But there is a lot of downtime trying to find bad guys in a computer somewhere. Yeah.
One of the things I would ask you is, I would presume when you were a pastor and someone like you made it an example, was talking about their wife or their marriage or whatever, I would have to say most of the time they were being truthful with you. How much of the truth they were telling could be debated, but I would imagine most of the time they were telling the truth because they wanted help. In the FBI, when you're talking to people, I would imagine that the opposite is true. Most of the time they're lying. And to what degree, it doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty, but everybody in the world will make light of something that, they know they shouldn't be doing. Whether or not it's illegal or not is another thing. But with that being said, did that work on you when everybody you talk to, and I have, friends who are first responders of one kind or another. It's the same attitude that they get all the time. It's called compassion fatigue. With paramedics, it's called compassion fatigue. Do you feel that as part of the FBI?
There's a difficulty, again, depending on what type of violation you're working, of growing cynicism towards society, even racism or bigotry. When I worked Mexican drug cartels in Chicago, all I saw were criminal Mexicans who either were carrying out sales of drugs, were helping people sell drugs, were helping them store it. And so it's difficult when that's all that you see. And then if you take that away, but all that you are working with is this businessman who steals money from investors, and one after another he's stealing. There is a difficulty in breaking out of a notion that this is everyone, that all people are terrible like this. Now, in some ways, it opens your eyes, because as you go by that taqueria, I know that guy is not going to get charged with anything, but he will occasionally let this person store cocaine in the back, and he has before. So there's the naivete is taken away, the innocence is taken away, and then you have to make sure it doesn't go so far to where now you're jaded and you think everyone is terrible.
Yeah. That's got to be tough. And quite frankly, with some of these situations where the police have been scrutinized in their actions, there's been some that were clearly bad, but most of them, by my estimation, is a lot of these police officers, quite frankly, are working what amount to war zones in some of those war-ridden gang communities. And they see this every day. And, so you take one little incident of that and say, well, you overreacted. And we have the luxury as citizens and people who watch the news, and lawyers have the same luxury. We can watch the tapes forwards and backwards and in slow motion and, have all this analysis, where the fact of the matter is that cop in that moment had 1 second to make a life and death decision in that kind of a situation. And I think it's unfair a lot of times. Am I wrong about that, or would you agree?
No. So two factors to that. One is because I might be judged based on a half-second reaction, I need to train well and be prepared and know my deadly force, know my rules of engagement, because I need to act quickly. And along with that, the very last thing that I want is for me to kill or injure someone who did not warrant it.
Yes.
But then to the other side of that, we would often, because I was a firearms instructor, we would often have what we called the Citizens Academy. So business leaders or community leaders were vetted and brought in, and they would go through a program where they could hear more about the FBI. And then it would culminate after a number of weeks where they would come to the range, and we would run them through a simulation where they've got a gun that shoots a laser and they've got a screen, and I can program it to how they'll interact. Mm-hmm. And they're shocked that the individual coming towards them just looking to say hi, if they don't give them commands to take hands out of the pocket or address them, there's a quick moment. And now these civilians are realizing that was fast, and that's just on video.
Yeah.
So it can be very difficult. And as we sit back, it's easy to make decisions and judgments, but also that's why I have to be at the top of my game and know how to make the right decisions too.
Sure. And that's definitely part of it. And that's one of the reasons why you guys go through as much training and scrutiny as you do, becoming an agent. You mentioned the amount of busy work, let's say, involved in monitoring phone calls and things like that. I would think that this is an area where AI would do very well.
It may. Well, we're just coming on the front end of AI, and that could be something. Yeah. So, Billy, already you've given me two ideas I've never thought of before, so that's fantastic.
Okay.
That and the professional juries.
In a nutshell, I don't think it would be a full-time thing, but for people who would ordinarily serve, what I've looked into is either people who are semi-retired or things of that nature. They would be part of a pool that both attorneys, both prosecutor and defense, could pull from. They would be people who had an analysis of some kind to make sure they're there for the right reasons, that they're have a certain competence level, and when they're on a jury, they would be compensated for it. I don't think it's something that they would do full time, but you would have a pool of pre-selected people who want to be there, and I think that's a big problem. A lot of people don't want to be there. All they think of is how can I get out of this.
Right.
And that's how you end up with people that, somebody like me, an audio guy, and all of a sudden I'm listening to all this testimony about DNA and everything else. And I just don't know if that's a good combination. I just think we need to revisit that just a little bit. So I just wanted to qualify that. I'm not thinking people would be full time all the time on the jury. I just don't think that's possible or feasible. But anyway, moving on. Getting back to technology, I do want to ask you this. Now, this might be more CIA, but some of the things that I've run across recently in terms of the technology that, well, quite frankly, I think Americans in general, people in general, have willingly given up a lot of their privacy. You look through some of these social media profiles now. It used to be your medical records were a big deal. You wanted to keep private. Now everybody has all their ailments and all the medications they're on right in their bio.
Yeah.
But with that being said, Snowden and some other people, like him or not, gave some insights into how easily people can be tracked now. I've suspected this for a long time, and I've heard it confirmed by some intelligence people that even a phone that's turned off can still possibly be used against you.
And that can be true. So for the FBI, at least, I can speak to what we do. Whatever intrusion that I make upon you or another citizen has already been vetted by a judge or a court. So it could be terribly intrusive. I could be tracking your phone that's off, or I could be breaking into your home and mirroring your computer and you don't know it, but that's been signed off by a judge. So I feel comfortable that while agents still make mistakes, and anything that is done isn't done at the whim of, let's just go ahead and download all of this without people knowing.
Yeah. You have mentioned terrorism in your pre-production notes here, and here's my thought on that, and I'll have you respond to it. I know a lot of times people are worried about World War III, nuclear war, and all this other kind of thing, and it's not impossible. But I'm going to have to say the odds of a missile being launched from a recognized state of some kind toward the United States is probably very unlikely. Not impossible. You can't preclude it, exclude it. But I doubt very much that would be at the top of my list, going to bed at night if I was in security. I think what is far more likely in terms of terrorism, and not to be crude here, but I would have to say that there's any number of terrorists throughout the world whose wet dream it is to bring a nuclear device or a biological weapon into the United States. It wouldn't have to be flown in. It could be driven right into a large population in a car, van, whatever, and set off. And here again, not to be political, but no matter both parties have played games with the politics of the border. But over the last, let's say, 5 years, a lot of people, and I've heard reports, FBI and others say there's how many thousands of people in here who are a great threat as criminals and other things. So we have a lot of people in here that don't like us, and a catastrophic event that would make 9/11 pale by comparison to me is something that to me is much more worrisome than the idea of a nuclear holocaust by missiles. How much of a threat do you think that is?
Well, I think that our most regular threat, the most pertinent threat, is going to be the individual homegrown violent extremist.
Okay.
What we've had more often is less of someone coming in within the past recent time for the purpose of carrying out a terrorist act, and much more often an individual living here, having come to the United States for educational purpose, work purpose, family, and then slowly or in one sharp moment being radicalized online. So those who are seeking to bring harm, the terrorist organizations, have changed from let's get people together, let's have a group plan we will now have these men do this, to putting out appeals for individuals to be the one who's going to make a difference. And so now as I sit at home and I need to find a way to expiate for my sins, to find some way to clean up my life, to show that I'm committed to bring revenge for atrocities done, I must now carry out this act. And I know that you're aware that all it took is a blue Caprice with a hole drilled in the trunk to shut down a city for a time. So it doesn't take, it could be something that makes 9/11 look smaller, but also you can have a hunting rifle in the back of a vehicle and just drive around town, and that will create a tremendous amount of terror. So it could be from a terrorist organization, or we also have many domestic terrorist groups, which are far more full of talk than they are action. But we've had that even in my area on a friend's case where an individual is part of a white supremacist group, and they would talk a lot about wanting to bring violence, but nobody would ever step forward. And it took this one man, Eamon Penny, to finally get angry enough where he tried to firebomb a church. And fortunately, he was only mildly successful.
Yeah. Speaking of homegrown terrorism, this kind of ties into my next question. I'm of a certain age, as they say. I'm of a certain age. I can remember I probably started to become a young adult during Reagan's presidency.
Okay.
And, Reagan and Tip O'Neill had their differences. And in the following decade, you had Clinton and, some other people. And here again, partisanship aside, Newt Gingrich and him, they still managed to get things done. And all of the people that I just mentioned lived in the same universe, playing by the same laws of physics. We now have a situation where people not only are entitled to their own opinion, but they are entitled to their own reality. And there is an anti-American sentiment in society that I was too young for Vietnam, but I'm going to say it probably wasn't present then from as many people as I've talked to that lived through that as an adult. I certainly didn't feel it during the Reagan and Clinton years. I didn't feel that there was a lot of people in this country who just hated America, couldn't say one good thing about it if you paid them. But we have that now. And it's very present on the college campuses. It's very present in a lot of different places. And I don't know that I've ever felt it as much as I do now. Where, the idea of flying an American flag is almost a radical thing to do. Is that my opinion? Or as somebody who spent time in the FBI and had a good feel of what was happening in society, is there an anti-sentiment, American sentiment in society that is potentially dangerous? Well,
so as you speak about politics in the past, the real only way that field offices were affected by politics were, depending on administration or attorney generals, there might be more of an appetite for certain violations being pursued, and then other times not as much. So we had for a time not a mandate, but definitely a push to look for Antifa actors back during the first Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And so I was part, and to be clear, whether we're looking at white supremacists or left-wing radicals, the grounds for an investigation have to include some type of pursuit of violence. Mm-hmm. So you can say the worst things that are disgusting and get you kicked out of any restaurant, but that's not enough to charge. But there needs to be some type of, and I'm going to do this because of it. And I can tell you that in trying to investigate Antifa actors, and this was during protests where there was in other areas damage to property, we were we were unsuccessful in finding those who were at least planning and going to go further. There might have been spontaneous actions that caused financial damage, but we were unable to find those who were organized in a way that were acting out because of a hatred towards America or institutions.
Interesting. Okay. I'll save some a dramatic question here. Obviously, any law enforcement person who's out in the field at all, sooner or later, is going to be threatened. And I know these things are played out every day on television shows, but they do happen. And when you're in one of those moments, when you're in a pickle, as they say, and maybe that little voice comes on in your head that says, "So is this how it's going to end?" Has that ever happened?
Yeah, it has. I have been in a handful of situations where I could have engaged with deadly force. And I'll tell you quickly one where we had a few years ago, we had a woman who had a mental break. She had waved a gun at people in an apartment building. And when the police came, she pointed at them. They retreated. And so then there became a barricaded situation. The difficulty was that she had her 10-year-old son in there with her too.
Yeah.
So as we took over to relieve the SWAT team that was there before us, we were down the hall of this garden apartment, the basement apartments, and our trigger for breaking in to address her was either she would threaten her child or fired a shot. Because at this point, the child was at harm. There was a threat to harm, but she wasn't threatening him. It's just that she wasn't all right in her head. And I'm a breacher. I'll be one of the first few at the door. There were 8 of us ready to make that entry. And as she got angry at the negotiators and fired a shot through her door, I looked at my team leader and I said, "That's our trigger." And I remember not being afraid, but I remember thinking, some of us are going to get shot and that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And the reality of, here we go, really sunk in. Fortunately for us, cooler heads considered really quickly that she was just angry. It still wasn't going to be a threat to the child, and we let it play out. And we ended up being relieved, and another team ended up killing her.
That's the type of situation that you can make with all the training in the world, the most astute decisions, but sometimes it's just a matter of how things unfold.
As we're trying to make entry through a narrow doorway on the end of a hall with no secondary entrance, you're just stuck with, here's a shit sandwich. Got to take a bite. Yeah.
That's one of the things that, just from what I know, I don't know where near have the firearm skills that you do, I'm sure, but I used to shoot competition and do some other things. And when I follow statistics on this, that's one of the things about TV shows where, you go bang, bang, and you hide around the corner and the other guy goes bang, bang. Most of the time, gunfights are boom, 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 and they're over.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at close range.
Yeah. A few feet and a couple of seconds.
Yeah. And in those few seconds, you're making decisions. I'll ask you this one more question. Since you've been in the FBI, you started as a man of faith, as they say. More or less faith now than when you were?
More faith, less practice.
Okay.
So I feel that through circumstances, there's much that I've said this many times, especially lately. So I've been taught, as it says in the Bible, to speak the truth in love. And now I still hold on to the truth, but I provide more love. I have found that I've never regretted showing kindness, openness, and humanity to others. It's never let me down. And my experience in the FBI proved that it was always valuable. So yeah, less practice, maybe more faith.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have a book coming out. Do you have a title? And when can we expect the book?
We can expect it in the fall. My wife has a publishing company, also markets books. Unfortunately, a couple of authors who are paying to have this done keep jumping the line in front of me. But we're looking at the fall. My book is tentatively titled Irreverend, because I was a reverend and did many irreverent things.
That's good. I like that.
It's good. Now the initial title, which we still may go back to, was Preacher to Preacher.
Preacher to Preacher. Okay.
Preacher to Breacher. I was a
Preacher to
Breacher.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I broke indoors for our SWAT team.
All right. That's really, really cool. Now, in the meantime, I'm guessing, you're on the podcast circuit because you want to raise interest for this. Where can people find you online?
They can find me online. My Instagram is _Eric_Robinson. And my LinkedIn is out there. You'll see this face if you search me with some FBI keywords or whatnot, and keep in touch that way. And then the book's website will be up soon, and I'll be promoting it through there as well.
Okay. Are you on X, or do you have plans to go on the former Twitter?
I am. I haven't posted anything. My wife keeps telling me this is what you're supposed to do to market yourself, so maybe I'll get to it.
Okay, well, because I got to tell you, people eat this stuff up on X.
Okay.
All this law enforcement stuff and the mix of politics. And I got to tell you, one of the biggest categories of podcasts, which I've never delved into, but one of the biggest ones of them all is true crime.
Yeah.
There's probably more true crime podcasts than there is true crime.
Well, so now if I follow your advice, I'm just going to make my wife angry, because she says, I've been telling you this the whole time, that's how you market. And then some guy just mentions it and you go do it.
Yeah.
But she's a parent. She should be used to that.
Yeah. Well, you got a couple of things here: authors, writing techniques, and of course, anything involving true crime are huge topics to begin with in the X, Twitter, podcast stratosphere. So, I mean, that's like a perfect storm. So I definitely would at least consider it. And in topical things, all that's going on right now with the Epstein files. Do you have an opinion about that? I personally think not much is going to come out of that. There's going to be a few things here and there. There's going to, like with the prints and a few other things. My experience with these things over the years is they generally don't bring down the world like everybody thinks they will.
Yeah, this is much. I'm sure that the agents who worked this back in the day are just, are sitting back in frustration saying, we tried to work. Somebody must have stepped in. And then you're just roadblocked. So yeah, like everybody else, I just sit back and watch, and then try not to pay much attention.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to see how that unfolds as we are in studio today. The Clintons have been interviewed, so we'll see as time moves forward. We've been talking to Eric Robinson. And thank you so much, Eric. Always, when you get the book together, and of course, in the meantime, if you want to come on, always just reach out. But when you get the book rolling, I mean, there's a lot of facets we can cover, because there's a hashtag called M-Writing, A-M Writing. And boy, I'll tell you what, anybody who's writing a book, anybody who likes to read, they just eat that stuff up about the process and how you go about it and how you assembled your material and They just love that stuff. And plus you have the true crime aspect of it. So there's a lot of things that we can do with you. So keep us in mind for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. My name is Billy Dees, and you can find the Billy Dees Podcast anywhere podcasts are found. We have over a 10-year history with the podcast in its current form. And we are on all the major podcast platforms, so we're not hard to find. As I mentioned, at Billy Dees on X, which is the former Twitter. I'm on most of the social media platforms, but I got to say X is kind of like my social media home for all the reasons that I mentioned. It's very real time. It's very trending. And a lot of times news is not only first reported there, but a lot of times it is made there. Biden, for example, announced that he was not going to run again on X. So, definitely for podcasting. It may not be for everybody. I know people say, oh, it's all politics and it's all this and that and the other thing. And it's negative. Yeah, it's all those things because that's what politics is. So, but I personally do well there, and that's probably the first place to find me. I do have links in my bio. Well, first of all, like I said, all you have to do is find me on for the podcast on any social media platform, the Billy Dees Podcast. And on X, I have a link tree in there, and all my other links are available there as well. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today, and we will talk to you again very, very soon. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter @Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.